Hello and welcome back to Karma Stories. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have some stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. Before we start today, make sure to check out the Karma Stories Patreon linked at the top of the description down below. I released a brand new Tales from the Front Desk story there that was way too not safe for work for YouTube and is kinda cringy, honestly. So if you want to check that one out, go to patreon.com/karmastories and check it out for yourself. Alright, on to today's stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from XTab8. Not a word from you about your resignation until I approve it. I used to be an operations engineer on a 1-year contract in a small department. There were only 4 of us and the seniors absolutely hated doing additional work. So when there was additional networking stuff required as part of a new project, it was dumped onto me. I didn't mind doing it as I was learning new stuff, but the lack of appreciation from the rest of the team and being underpaid made me look for other jobs when my 1-year contract was almost up. Fortunately, I was able to get a much better offer from one of my ex-employers with about a month to go for my current contract. My current company never reached out to me to talk about renewing my contract, so I thought I'd just give them a heads up that I'm resigning and not renewing my contract. My manager at the time used to be an engineer like us, but was promoted 6 months prior, and was incredibly cocky because of that. I went into his office and handed him my resignation letter, told him I was resigning and would be happy to hand over my stuff and train the others before leaving. He takes a look at the letter, gets really pissed, and tells me he isn't going to sign and acknowledge the letter until he decides what date I'm allowed to leave. He said this will happen after he's found someone to replace me and when he's in a better mood, essentially trying to hold me hostage. But my contract only has 1 month. Before I could say 2 words, he says, "No more talking. Did you not hear me say I won't approve it until I'm happy? I don't want to hear a word about this from you until I'm ready." Note, this was a very long time ago where resignations via email weren't as common. I thought about explaining to him when he had calmed down, but decided, F it. If that's what he wants, then I'll comply. So I continued working for the rest of the month, with absolutely no handover done until the last day. On the last day of my contract, I head into his office and hand him my laptop, badge, etc. "What's this?" "My stuff. Today's my last day." "Stop effing joking around. I told you that I haven't acknowledged your resignation letter yet, which, by the way, I've just decided your last day will be 2 months from now because we need to look for a replacement, train him up, and get a proper handover before you can leave. So keep your stuff and get back to work." He gives me this incredibly cocky look like he got me. Nope, my contract runs out after today. I'm not paid to work beyond that. "You what?" "Yep, I've been trying to tell you from the start. My resignation letter was a courtesy since my contract runs out anyway, but you didn't allow me to finish talking." "You're effing bullcrapping me." "Nah, go to HR and check. See ya." I watch his face turn from anger and cockiness to shock as I walk away from his office. A few months later, I found out he got a stern lecture by the director, even though he tried to put the blame on me. Ended up hiring a network engineer that cost triple what they paid me, and breached multiple SLAs for the period before the new hire joined. Jumping down to the comments on this one, there's one from a user called Someone76543. It says, "Yeah, even if you weren't at the end of your contract, employers not acknowledging a resignation letter makes no difference. The resignation letter is telling your employer you're quitting. It's not asking for permission to quit, because you don't need permission. This isn't slavery. You can give your contractually required notice and then leave." So in this case, wouldn't you say that OP technically gave them 12 months notice because they were on a 1-year contract? That contract was going to end at the end of that year, no matter what they did in this case, whether he gave them a notice period or not. That was the end of the contract. The boss should have known this. This just lets us know that this boss has no idea what's going on in their own workplace, and they probably shouldn't be a boss. This story comes to us from More Cowbell. You might as well let me finish it myself. I used to work on the loading dock of a fruit packing plant. The plant would get orders of a certain amount of heavy boxes of kinds and sizes of fruit, usually apples, and we used forklifts to bring our palletfuls of boxes from cold storage, reload those boxes by hand onto different pallets to fit the order, and then load the order into semi-trucks to be shipped. The apples were clean-ish, but the boxes and pallets were not, so it was dusty, physical labor for sometimes more than 8 hours a day, but we all pulled our weight. One coworker was not always that bright, but had somehow convinced himself he was smarter than the rest of us. Think of constant assistant to the regional manager vibes, but without the funny. We were in the middle of loading an order, and it happened to fall to him to do most of the hand stacking, as it sometimes does, while the rest of us were finishing other necessary jobs. The previous order I had done most of the hand stacking, which was fine, while he had been somehow nowhere to be found till the very end. It's okay, stuff happens, but it was a pattern with him, and the supervisor never seemed to hound him about it. So now he's doing the heavy lifting, and I have the option to immediately join him and help, or let my own muscles rest for a minute by doing a different, necessary job of tying off the tops of fully loaded pallets before jumping in. I chose the latter, still physical, but not as. By the time I was done, he was still stacking. I knew there was only room for 2 to stack at a time, and I looked at the other guys to see if they might help instead, but they were still finishing up their own jobs. Since I was earliest done, I figured I should just help him and get it over with. I walk over, grab a box, break the glue that holds it to the other boxes so the entire stack doesn't fall apart, and get ready to lift. That's when he said it. You might as well let me finish it myself. For whatever reason, this had been a thing my supervisor had been saying the last few days when coworkers had been slow, kind of teasing them, but also trying to light a fire too. So here's him borrowing my supervisor's line, directing it at me. I could see he was angry and felt justified. I froze, box in hand, glue half broken, and looked up at him. Okay. I let the box fall and walked across the dock to where I now see the rest of my coworkers and my supervisor watching us. Their work was done, and they were all standing there waiting for Shane to finally be done with his. I just realized they'd seen and heard everything, and I expected my supervisor to chew me out because he'd always been adamant about not letting stupid arguments get in the way of work. He didn't say a word. None of them did. I maintained my calm pace until I joined them. Then I turned and watched. We'll call him Shane because it's actually his name. Finish his job. It was just a couple more minutes, but it was glorious. It was like we were all just taking a second before our next order, but no one else joined him. We just watched, and I could almost see his brain activity try to figure out what had just happened, like gears spinning but not engaging. I've worked a lot of crappy jobs with not always the best of people, but this is a moment that always makes me smile. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Andros Halferk. It says, sounds like no one else wanted to work with him, and we're just waiting till someone else bit the bullet so they could finish their jobs. Another commenter down below called Ancient N7108 said, some people are like slinkies, not really good for anything, but you can't help but smile when one tumbles down the stairs. I don't know, OP, I think you're a better person than I am because you actually went to help in the first place. If this guy had been a bit of a dick in the past and was thinking that he was smarter than the rest of you, I would have been sitting back with everybody else waiting for somebody else to go up and help him because why would I do that if he's just gonna treat me like crap? This story comes to us from Crazy A-Hole. 0 OT, you got it. Years ago, I worked in a meat packing plant as a supervisor. It had its ups and downs, but overall, it was good. Until a new production manager was hired. We'll call him Bob. Bob didn't come from the floor or even leadership. He had an engineering background. Whatever, I'll try to keep an open mind. Well, my mind was only open for about 4.5 minutes. First day, first time meeting, he declares he's going to right the ship. Sure thing, boss. Right that ship that is already sailing in the right direction. He declares that going forward there will be no more overtime. He states, "We are pissing away money with the amount of overtime we pay." I ask for clarification, what about vacation coverage, sick calls, etc.? He replies, "No overtime, no exceptions." Sure thing, boss man. Now, I should point out the department I work in is massive. My direct team at that time was 70 people. There were other rooms that other supervisors looked after for a total of 220-ish employees. Now, I'm assuming all of you reading this are infinitely smarter than Bob and have figured out that with a team that size, we don't just get one sick call, we averaged 7 per day. Vacations? 10% of the workforce was our cutoff. Usually we hovered at 12 people a day. Not to mention leaves of absence, people leaving early, etc. So on Friday, I went to Bob one last time. I let him know that we're going to be short 19 people next week and asked once more for him to approve overtime. I got a flat no in response. I considered going above him, but figured letting the guy down would be better. I didn't ask for overtime. Employees were coming up to me, "Boss, are you sure there's no overtime next week?" "Yes, I'm sure. Bob wants it that way." Come next week, 2 production lines aren't running. Bob comes to me upset, demanding to know why 2 of the lines aren't running. Is it mechanical downtime? "No, Bob, I have no one to run the line." He stammers something about staffing appropriately and having better planning. "I asked you multiple times to approve overtime. You said no each time. I was just following your direction." Cue the angry storm off, with him yelling, "Get some effing people in here." Anyways, I then have to call people at home and schedule overtime for the rest of the week, because Bob sunk our ship instead of righting it. I couldn't staff those 2 lines that day. For those wondering, not running those 2 lines that day lost the company $120,000. No, I'm not exaggerating. Bob gets a strip torn off him by his boss, a guy I've known at that time for 10 years. He came and spoke to me about it outside. What the F was he thinking? I thought engineers were supposed to be smart. I choked on my cigarette laughing. Bob lasted about 3 months. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Hamilton Panda. It says, "Not that I think I'll ever be management, but the one thing I've learned from all the new manager malicious compliance stories is that you never change things until you've worked there for a long time. And always listen to the people who repeatedly ask if you're sure." Another commenter down below called Crispa63 said, "Bob forgot how to be an engineer. Rule number 1, if it ain't broke, don't fix it." One more commenter called Buddy Matt said, "Hot take here, but if you can predict you'll be on average 17 people down a day as a department, you should be employing 17 additional people and not relying on overtime." Another hot take is that 10%, 7 out of 70 average sick rate is insanely high sounding. To hit that, you need each member of staff to be taking around 26 days of sick leave a year. That's crazy high. Especially if overtime is paid at a higher rate than regular pay, time and a half or similar. Bob was entirely correct that the department was pissing money up the wall on overtime, because it clearly wasn't staffed correctly. His error was thinking that he could solve that with a single wave of the hand. He should have done a load of hiring first, or reduced overtime without outright canceling it at all. Of course, it's possible he was trying to make a case that the department needed more staff by performing a statement action. The problem for him was his superiors simply saw the stupid decision to go from 100 to 0 rather than evidence his department was understaffed. OP responded to this one and said, "You are absolutely right, that was the issue. Down the road we did exactly as you mentioned and hired extra people to offset overtime. I know the sick calls sound high, but it's food manufacturing. It's cold, wet, and monotonous work. Our retention rate for new hires was abysmal. Something like 20% would make it past the first 2 weeks. So we just took what we could get." It sounds like that's the kind of job that people go into thinking it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows, and then they realize that they actually have to do hard work, and some of that hard work is kind of disgusting as well, as it definitely can be in food processing. You know, if managers went into a brand new job and actually sat back and paid attention to what everybody was doing and learned how the processes go, and just observed before making any changes, well, then we wouldn't have any stories in this subreddit. I feel like in this story, Bob was actually right that they were using too much overtime and that they shouldn't be using so much overtime. But he went about it completely the wrong way. He should have observed for probably a few weeks at least, and then figured out that they needed to bring on more people to offset the overtime. Really work out the numbers and figure out how many people you needed to bring on to reduce the cost of the overtime. It always amazes me that managers just make decisions without actually doing any research. This story comes to us from WB Robot. If you want more money, leave. A few years ago, I started a new position. The manager encouraged me to get my license and promised that I'd be promoted to assistant manager. But I had already proven myself over the years and had earned the title assistant to the manager, running the office smoothly. Here's the thing. Licensing requires a bachelor's degree, so I went back to online community college to finish my associate's degree, then continued with online college to obtain my bachelor's degree. I'll be graduating later this year, and will have all the other prerequisites to take the state exam in December. In early spring, my manager started planting seeds of doubt that the assistant manager position would not be available under the current ownership, since the new owners didn't believe the company was big enough to require assistant managers. So instead of a $20,000 raise with the increase in title and responsibilities, I was told a $6,000 raise should occur, since the company generally pays more to employees in other departments who completed higher education. Then it became, without a title change, there can be no increase in pay. Then came the fateful phrase, if you want more money, you'll have to leave. Okay, boss. Aside from my general disdain for being lied to, I had incurred some minor student loans to fund my bachelor's degree, and I needed some additional money to start paying them back after graduation. I gave my resume to a colleague in the field and asked them to keep me in mind if they heard of any openings, expecting to hear something late this year or early next. However, in early June, just a couple of weeks after reaching out, I started getting interviews for a new job that I never even applied to. A couple of weeks after that, I accepted a job offer that was more than the $6,000 raise. I actually got to see a real-life shocked Pikachu face when I told the manager I was leaving. They never saw it coming. I was gracious enough to give a longer than industry standard notice. Although the new job requires a bit more of a commute, I'm much happier at the new company. I've since heard through the grapevine that my replacement is still struggling with even the basics of my old job. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Thuban. It says, as a middle manager, the one thing I can never get the C-suite people to understand is retention is cheaper than hiring and training. But the sad truth is, true advancement almost always means you got to monkey branch. The suits where you start will almost always see you as the person they hired and not what you've become. Best of luck. It really does seem these days that climbing the corporate ladder is just not really something people do anymore. It's more like corporate parkour, jumping from one job to another, working your way higher and higher to get those better pays. There's just no company loyalty anymore. One reason for this might be because corporations these days are just looking to save money. It's not really caring about the people in the company, it's getting the cheapest person to do the job. And unfortunately, if you're promoting from within, those people expect raises, and not small ones. Alright, we'll go ahead and end this one here. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to follow us on your favorite podcasting platform. If you're on Spotify, please go up and hit that follow button. We are at about 5,500 followers right now, and I'd love to see that up to 6,000 by the end of September. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video, please. It really does help us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.